checking on my facts, and I admit I have been lax in double screening what I say. It wasn't funny anyway. I stand corrected. I stand corrected. No one cares when you are wrong, but I've been at this far too long to act like that when we should be in perfect harmony. I stand corrected.
But communication began before this. From Philippides of Greece, who ran from Athens to Marathon, to Paul Revere and even to the Telegraph's predecessor, the Pony Express, communications have always impacted history in a memorable and noteworthy way. Today, we email, text, page, and call our friends and family by using the telephone and computer. In the 1800s, the Pony Express was the main way to communicate. After the transcontinental telegraph was completed, it took only 2 days to push the Pony Express aside and a new era had begun.
I'll take your hand right in mine.
That was the way of getting a message from A to B. It was a system of incremental. There were stages, literally stages, where a horse would, they knew what the limit of a horse was, and you had every X number of miles. You had a fellow with a horse that the rider could bring the message to and hop on this new fresh horse, and speed was of the essence. So you've seen in the movies the guy just jumping off a horse and jumping on another horse and taking off. But it was probably one of the most inefficient ways of getting a message from here to there. I mean, you're just wrecking these horses. They could only physically carry so much when you think of it. I mean, how much could you get in a saddlebag? It was one of those little windows of time where it could exist. But of course, economics really determines everything. And it existed for a short amount of time. It was really the only way to communicate with the frontier and with the West. But it didn't last very long. I don't really know what the time period of its inception to its demise. But I know it ended, like I said, it ended 2 days after the transcontinental telegraph was. So it was an inefficient but probably useful transportation technology in terms of being able to communicate that way. But it was really, when you think of it, it's really very primitive.
With the discovery of gold on the West Coast, the need for communication was thrown into very sharp relief. Although the telegraph lines were expanding west, they did not reach far enough. The Pony Express was the solution to this dilemma. Small, lightweight riders were hired on to ride on horseback between the coast and the unfinished telegraph line. Swapping horses and riders trading off, mail was carried at high speed between rest stations to keep up with America's need for communication. By July 1860, the mail was being carried in both directions twice per week.
Insulator is a big problem that the manufacturers shipped out, but those in the wire at least are reasonable in size and weight. The big thing literally are the poles. And typically you'd go across the countryside, you just go out and knock down a tree and strip it and stick it in, and whether you put creosote on it or whatever, and you have a telephone pole. But there are long stretches of the Midwest that are treeless, and where to get trees is a major undertaking, and that is in fact the case. Nevertheless, with all this impetus, and they're anxious to get it done before winter and all that sort of thing, and they do. And by October 26th, you can check that, they complete the line, and there we are. We're coast to coast with the telegraph.
The demand for the telegraph was tremendous. Samuel Morse was the first to develop an experimental line from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore in 1844. After this, Congress offered $40,000 to any company willing to create such a system. The Western Union Telegraph Company immediately began work on the transcontinental telegraph. After much hard work and a long wait, it was finished in 1861. The transcontinental telegraph was recognized as a great advance in communications by many. However, there was some opposition to the telegraph.
The whites are being massacred at the telegraph camp.
Oh, do your part, men. Why, with the telegraph line in, this wilderness will become a living part of the colonies.
How much work is there left to do?
Just the final link. Now we'll start here and finish
Right there. That's my last warning to you.
When the idea of a telegraph was first introduced to Congress, not all members agreed to fund the work. Some congressmen argued it was a waste of money, which they claimed would be better used for war funds. Even after the plan for the telegraph was approved, the men disagreed with the idea. It was not until the telegraph was successful that the reluctance of the men was lifted.
One of the ways he tried it out was from a political convention in Philadelphia, a national convention nominating presidents, nominating candidates for president. And I'm trying to remember all the details now, but you know, if the convention was in Philadelphia back then, it took a day maybe, or certainly many hours to get to Washington. I mean, it's 2 hours by car now, so it'd take a while to get a message. And so Washington didn't really know what was going on in terms of the national convention. And the details I'm a little sketchy on, but it did have a major effect in that someone was, they were deadlocked. They didn't have enough, nobody had enough votes to get the nomination. So they went for another fellow, I think his name was Frelinghuysen or something, and he wasn't there. And once he got word of it by a telegraph, he said he would not accept the nomination. So a telegraph, the beginnings of the telegraph, the first time a telegraph was really used in a political way was for a political convention. And once the fellow was nominated, the news came immediately to Washington. In fact, it came so quickly that nobody really believed it.
So how did this new method of instantaneous communication impact today's technology? First came the telegraph. Then, Thomas Edison invented an electric version, the telegram. After tinkering with his invention, in 1860, Edison invented the first device to transmit voice, the telephone. Later, in 1955, the first computer was created. In 1969, the predecessor of the Internet was born, the ARPANET. Then, in 1989, the Internet was born from the ARPANET, and computer-to-computer connections were available for the first time. Around the same time, the first portable telephone was beginning to gain popularity. In just over 160 years, the world has progressed from the days of the telegraph and the Pony Express to instant communication anywhere.
One thing that happens is the telephone. And I mean, at first, if you wanted to make a long-distance call, and you know, not to London, to New York, you had to go through the operator and tell her that you want to make a call, and so forth. You know, that was for 2 or 3 years, and you had to log in and all this sort of stuff. And then, you know, then the fax machine came in. That was great. You could do that. And then, of course, the computer comes along and all that business. And it is, you know, the last 10, 15 years in particular, I mean, it's a joy to work this way. You can, you know, get answers almost immediately. You can deal with people around the world. You can get answers and get questions and so forth.
From the Pony Express to the ever-expanding technology of today, the world has come incredibly far in communication. Once, it was not possible to communicate instantly, but that is the past and this is the present. The telegraph inspired a change we can believe in.
Lovers, keep on the road you're on. Runners, until the race is run.